roads, emergency services. While it's true that there are campus police and health services, nonetheless, the bulk of Northwestern students and staff rely on public services the city pays for. This is why voluntary financial contributions in lieu of taxes are becoming the norm among large private universities. The Ivy League colleges now pay them, including some with smaller budgets and endowments than Northwestern's. It is in a university's interest to provide a safe, welcoming, and aesthetically pleasing community for prospective students and faculty. People want to live in healthy, functioning communities. Faculty and staff want high-quality housing and excellent public schools for their children. 11.9% of Evanstonians, or 9,300 people, live in poverty. It's worth noting that 11.2 million of Northwestern is supporting a private police force, ostensibly to keep students safe. Yet campus police are actually a danger to local residents of color. Northwestern's Community Not Cops organization has documented numerous incidents of campus police harassment of Black students and residents. If Northwestern were really concerned about campus safety, they could spend some of that surplus on bolstering youth and young adult services, education, job training, and affordable housing, thus benefiting both residents and the university members who live in this community. In its publicity materials, Northwestern promotes its many initiatives with District 65 and 202, its Good Neighbor Fund, and other short-term gifts and programs. Yet these efforts are primarily determined by Northwestern, not by the citizens of Evanston, and do not address the most pressing community needs. A true Good Neighbor Fund would put the money directly in the hands of Evanston City Council and school boards to use as they see fit, representing the will of Evanston residents. The university and Evanston are interconnected. Both need to recognize that the strength and quality of life in Evanston and at the university remains strongest by working together. We couldn't agree more. So let's see Northwestern commit to working meaningfully with the city to support the services that both entities need. Northwestern respects Evanston. Thank
you. The gentleman in the maroon tie.
Okay.
Sure.
Is it okay if I sit and project? Or would you
If
prefer
you what?
If I sit and project, or would you prefer I stand?
If you have good projection, you can sit.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Adam Goldsmith. I'm a resident in the 4th Ward and also a proud member of the Northwestern Graduate Workers. Like many of you, we've been enjoying this nice weather, and yesterday I decided to take a walk by the lakeshore and saw one of those clean, crisp new signs that we've been seeing. Private financing, public benefit. And I thought to myself, sounds pretty good. But what is it going to take in order to make sure that we have the public benefit in the name of the public to which it's purporting to benefit? And so my thesis to you all is that we should hold Northwestern accountable for their public benefits promise through a community benefits agreement, which at the last one of these meetings, there's been some initial openness to. For 3 main reasons. 1, the enforcement of the public benefit to make sure that this is a commitment that has some real meat to it. 2, so the public has a say in what will benefit the public. And 3, because this is being done across the country, this is not a radical proposal, it's very practical and could benefit both Northwestern and the wider community. First point, enforcement. Following, I'm such an academic, apologize, Julian Gross, writing in the Journal of Affordable Housing and Community Development Law, she identifies community benefits agreements. Their key advantages are inclusivity and accountability. And this is what a community benefits agreement would do. It would make sure that there's a legally binding document that says Northwestern will do this in exchange for the community agreeing to support their initiative. Secondly, having the public have a say in deciding what will benefit the public. There are many things that the public needs that are not being included in the purported benefits that Northwestern is talking about. Some of them from the Northwestern Accountability Alliance include affirmative action inclusion policies, comprehensive environmental and social impact plans, contributions to Evanston's reparations program, expanded mental health services, child care facilities, investments in affordable housing, the list goes on. The point is, we should have a say and a seat at the table in deciding what will benefit us. And so we welcome in good faith Northwestern to come to the table for that. Finally, this is not radical. This is being done across the country. Some of the current CBAs in effect include Nashville, one in Nashville, Tennessee, the Facebook campus expansion, Warm Springs expansion in California, Lorenzo, Bayview, Hunters Point CBA, Dearborn Street CBA in Washington, Ballpark, Village CBA in San Diego, one for the Los Angeles International Airport. The list goes on. The point is, this is not a crazy proposal. This is not radical. There's even in Yale, the Respect New Haven Community Benefits Agreement that came forward as well. So there's precedent for this between universities and between the communities, not just between sports entertainment companies. So the point is, this could be done. This is very practical. As my colleague mentioned earlier, there's the money to do this, so we should do it. Let's make sure that Northwestern can be accountable for the public benefit, that there's enforcement mechanisms. Let's make sure there's public input for the public benefits going into these claims. And let's do this because it could be done. And I think it's just the fair thing to do. And I hope that we will continue to move forward on this. Thank you all.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to?
Hi, my name is Mary Rosinski. I'm a member of the 7th Ward. I'm here to speak on two things. Well, actually three, but the first one I want to say is regardless of this plan, when Northwestern built their fence that we agreed with, and worked with them so well between the parking lot and the neighborhood, it was because Northwestern needed more security so that they wouldn't have to put up 18-foot lights. So that's what we did. And then it was also because Northwestern had been asked by our previous alderperson possibly to have people leaving the parking lot put through all the neighborhoods. And we said, no, it's for security. This is to a fence. Everyone agreed to it. Then they built a fence and they put pillars with a removable possible fence to the parking lot, and only at the end of the major street. So it's very evident if you go down the alley that there is an intention to remove between the pillars at the end of the street that portion of fence so that the parking lot can go through residential neighborhoods. So since this is a T1, I just want to be really clear. There is a healthy balance with keeping your neighborhood and your large institutional separate so that you preserve the future of both. And I don't want to see those fences removed between those balancers and have turned the neighborhood into a highway for people exiting the parking lot, whether or not this project, well, the project move forward as a parking, whatever they do, but just keep the parking lot on Main Street, not too residential. The second thing I want to talk about is that Evanston is in the middle of a redoing their comprehensive plan. That's our vision for the city. That's a community thing. This plan to change the zoning use shreds that comprehensive plan. And it's not up to Northwestern to define Evanston's comprehensive plan. And to take a mega entertainment district and put it smack in the middle of established neighborhoods is unconscious. And there's no studies anywhere in this country that I can find, and in my business, I'm in real estate, that where property values and neighborhoods have improved when they're already established by, no one would do this anywhere. You wouldn't blow apart a neighborhood that you're trying to create. They put it in blighted neighborhoods and vacant neighborhoods. They don't put it in the middle of established neighborhood where there's no adequate transportation to get to. So maybe a great project, it may bring in money somewhere, but it should go someplace else.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say that my name is Dave Cook. I'm on 7th Ward. I'm totally opposed to the zoning approval of the zoning variances. They don't need a zoning variance to rebuild their stadium. They can rebuild it, and they can have their football games and as it is. But they need a zoning variance to have nice music, which would not fit in the neighborhood. And the zoning ordinance is supposed to protect the neighborhood from incompatible uses and incompatible size of building. The scale of that building would be wrong, and that's another zoning variance that they're asking for, is a bigger building, and that would not fit in the neighborhood. And the third one is that they're looking for a variance so they don't have to provide parking. And we all know that parking is a big issue up there, and they're just ignoring that issue, and they're just gonna asking to increase it and increase the pain on the neighborhood. I think that it should be not accepted on all three accounts.
Aaron Cohen, 7th Ward, and I just find it ironic, having participated in the Evanston Thrives initial survey and hearing the presentation that was made to the city council and reading the presentation, that it was as if a left hand and a right hand were supposed to clap and missed one another by a mile. Because the Evanston Thrives vision of invigorating the business corridors in downtown probably was pulled together in good faith with no clue that Northwestern's intention was to suck the energy for entertainment and business to North Evanston. It's an example of a lack of coordination, the appearance of good faith communication, costing this city at least at this point $500,000, $240,000 for Evanston Thrives. What's the independent impact study going to cost us? Because Northwestern, heaven forbid, will not reveal its proprietary CSL data. And the tab increases. And as a taxpayer who digs deeper and deeper into my pocket every year, I'm actually tired of subsidizing this lack of coordination.
Yeah.
Hi, Beth.
I'm Evie Russell, and I've been in fight with Northwestern for decades now. When lawyers and judges determine if a sentence upon a defendant, they look at the defendant's previous actions. But the counsel has told me history doesn't count. You know, what was doesn't count. The fact that Northwestern promised and broke the promises over and over again when they built the stadium in 1996. The stadium is not 100 years old because it was quite rebuilt and totally different in 1994, 1996, now I forget. And at that time, they promised the neighborhood no night games. We intend no night games. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You, Mr. Davis, said on, you know, I'm paraphrasing that on my watch, we're not going to come back and ask for things for the stadium, concerts for the stadium. But you were very smart. You said it's not going to be for 2 years. Yes, you came back after 3 years to ask for that. So, you're totally honest. You only said 2 years. I am concerned about the environmental effects of the project of this new stadium. We cannot forget the Bears gridlock that extended all the way to downtown and beyond when the Bears came. The fact that the L they had to put in whole new construction so that passengers could go through. We don't even have that now. Pollution travels, so that if we have pollution in our neighborhood caused by the cars and trucks, because that's another thing that Northwestern wants, unlimited idling of the trucks. Another thing, band practices at any event. So noise pollution, car pollution. The Northwestern study that came out only a couple of years ago that studied the effects of pollution, car pollution and exhaust, is not just pulmonary disease, it's also heart disease. So the Northwestern scientists are fully aware of that, but Northwestern is not, obviously, the sports department. And the street destruction that's going to occur because of all of that traffic. So promises were not kept in the past. Northwestern has been trying to do this professional thing since the 1950s, and the council has always stood strong against this. I will say this, that once the quality of life is gone, it is gone for good, while monetary gains are ephemeral. To lower the standard of living in one community for the ephemeral benefits to another community is exactly what happened when those communities were subject to redlining and other injustices. Do you want to be responsible? I'm saying this to the Second Ward aldermen for bringing harm to our community. Is that a way to redress past injustices in your community? No. The jobs in Northwestern is promising, unless I'm wrong, are promised during the construction. So that's 2 years of jobs. This is not a building of intergenerational wealth in the undeserving communities. Number one, it's not a great number of jobs. Number two, those jobs will not pay top dollars. They're subcontracted jobs. I don't know if they even will provide health insurance. And number three, they'll be gone after 2 years. So if any money comes to the city from Northwestern, it's not going to go into the pocket of these 9,300 people in poverty, believe me. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Councilmember Jeff Smith online would like to speak.
Okay,
If that's okay.
sure. Jeff?
Hi, Jeff Smith. I live on Harrison Street, 1 block south of Central, and within walking distance of the stadium. And I just want to address 2 points. The first is the scope of this committee, and there seems to be some question in the agenda as to whether or not comments such as we've just heard can even be considered or discussed. I think that this committee should be expansive in how it looks at its jurisdiction. This committee grew out of a very toxic dispute and lawsuits that were not good for either the university or the city. So although the consent decree is a legal document, this committee should not confine itself to just the consent decree. The title of this committee is not the City University Committee on Historic Preservation compliance. It's the City University Committee. So it's good to have a channel for people to discuss matters Northwestern. And that's sort of my second point. There should be a formal channel for resident communication with the university on pretty much any municipal issue that impacts the university or by which the university is impacted. Both my wife and I took communication studies at Northwestern, and I distinctly remember the concept of the ethos that we were taught in those classes, key to which is the idea that communication is a two-way street and that effective communication depends on evaluating the recipient of a message's reaction and their response. Effective communication can't just be push out like a marketing campaign or a political campaign. And unfortunately, that has characterized much of the public messaging on stadium issues. Residents, nobody should be bludgeoned into an outcome. The best possible outcome will be achieved through more communication, and this committee should expand its mission and take an expansive view of what affects the T1 districts, which is clearly within the scope of the consent decree, in order to have the best outcome for everybody concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Yes.
I'd like to raise 2 points that I don't think I've heard yet so far this evening. The first, I guess I would characterize it as the externalization of costs.
Your name?
Brian Regan, Seventh-Ward. The externalization of costs, and then the second is the characterized as the reliance interest. The simple truth is that right now, with regard to football games, Northwestern is already outsourcing, by and large, parking to the nearby streets, nearby neighborhoods. And so there have been a couple instances in the last couple of years where I've had folks, really out of towners that are parked on my block, and they can't wait to get over to the Northwestern parking lot for tailgating. So they'll start their tailgating right there and just be drinking and having a boombox going for hours. Now, if you have outdoor concerts, I think that's arguably or implicitly sending a message that large swaths of Evanston are going to become essentially entertainment communities like Wrigleyville. Certainly that's going to be true for the 7th Ward. I think it's probably going to be true for the 1st Ward as well. And, if you're in the Northwestern corner, I could see somebody responding or reacting and saying, you know what, 6 games a year, you knew that when you moved in here, this is what you signed up for. And that's a fair point. But the thing is, there's a concept in the law of reliance interest, in terms of legal precedence, where if a precedent has been a long-standing aspect of the law, and people have grown to rely on that precedent and build their lives and their economic fortunes around that, courts are extremely reluctant to overturn that precedent. There's a significant presumption that the precedent should stand. And here you have lots and lots of folks that have moved into Evanston over the last, 30, 40 years, bought a home, improved the home, raised a family, become real stakeholders in the community. And now to suddenly, upend all that and jerk the rug right out from underneath their feet, it's not fair and might have be raising some legal claims.
I just want to capitalize on your point and maybe fix.
Can you say your name? I'm sorry.
Judy Bird. I'm 7th Ward, part of the working group committee. Anyway, when we bought our house 30 years ago, I questioned my realtor and I said, we're so close to the stadium. He goes, don't worry, there's zoning in place to protect you. So we, tired of hearing you bought it there, you have to deal with it. But it's not just 6 games. It's 20 baseball games, it's 20 basketball games, it's 10 graduations, and it's not ever since I've lived here been that controlled. So we need to move forward and we need to find solutions.
Fiona McCarthy, 7th Ward. Tagging on to what Judy said, I can say about my house 5 years ago, and we were given those same promises. We have 2 very small children. We have elderly family members in our neighborhood. We sit directly across the street from a park. In fact, there are 13 parks within a 1-mile radius of football stadium. So when we think about the schools and the parks and the children that are going to be impacted and the families and the access to emergency services or cell signal when these games at the stadium is packed, whether it's 10,000, 25, or 35,000 people, these are major impacts to our lives that we did not sign up for. Yeah, one last thing to Councilmember Kelly, because Councilmember Rovell was not aware, there are state laws restricting the amount of noise between commercial and residential businesses. And I can guarantee you, with my engineering background, I will be standing at property lines, taking readings whenever. The situation in this room, Mr. Davis, is no longer a bunch of NIMBYs or a bunch of older people complaining about what's happening in their neighborhood. We are diverse, we are organized, we we are on social media, and we are determined to fight for our lives.
Thank you.
Community-wide.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
And then we have the payment.
My name's Sarah Fox. I live in the Senate Board.
Thank you.
Sarah,
Sarah Plum.
Sarah Fox.
Sarah Plum.
6 schools from Grosse Point over to Batavia. 6 schools. So this is gonna be the largest tavern in. Yeah, it's over the United Center, so, you know,
Bigger.
I moved here 5 years ago. Now I'm in the Evanston Terraces, first we're in a rental on, East Wood. And, oh, neat, I knew, I signed up for it, but neat. You get woken up at 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning because people are drinking outside, you know, big bottles of vodka. So I think those are probably, that would be probably a better crowd than the rock concerts that are here, you know? And why don't they have it on the Northwestern campus?
Yeah.
It does not go with their mission statement to have rock concerts and stuff. This is music. And if nothing is concert, they couldn't have it. They probably legally couldn't have it on the campus because they're trying to sneak something in. It's not a Nobel Prize winner reading a speech or something. There's nothing educational about it. It's rock concerts. It's drunken teenagers. And one of the things that I don't think anyone has acknowledged yet, you know, I'm not speaking clearly because I'm so keen, is that the garbage, I don't know what $1 million contract they have with some PR firms. I mean, the garbage I've been getting, the propaganda in my email, oh, this is what Evanston has always wanted, a cultural center. Like, and then when there's a coming here from the community, all lies. And it's like, oh, well, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is a great idea? Or do you think this is a fantastic idea? And I don't feel this one. And now, I had only lived here for 5 years, now I'm listening to some of the community members. We also, it seems like we would be idiots to trust what Northwestern says. One, whatever, rock concert or like monster truck display, I don't know. It's all over. They're gonna keep trying to get more. Hi, my name is Hannah May. Hannah May. My brother's first word. I'm an undergraduate student. I'm not one of the drunken teenagers. I don't say that just to start. But I spoke a little bit last time about just like my perspective as an undergrad student. I'm also here today. I mentioned as a member of Students Organizing for Labor Rights, or SOLAR, so I'm here speaking on behalf of them. We're an organization of undergraduate students that seeks to build solidarity with campus workers and advocate for workers' rights. So in addition to just some of my comments from last meeting about, you know, pushing for community leadership from Northwestern, I'm also here to comment on some of SOLAR's history with Northwestern and our understanding of current labor conditions at Northwestern, seeing that Northwestern promises equitable working conditions with the new stadium construction project. So previously, just SOLAR was founded in 2018 in response to Northwestern's Dexco to Aramark to Compass as Northwestern's food service provider. And SOLAR has supported workers financially through mutual aid through the pandemic, and in 2021, mobilized undergraduate student support when workers were negotiating their contracts for a living wage and guaranteed health insurance. So I personally haven't been involved with SOLAR for fairly long, or even in Northwestern as a part of the Evanston community. But I have been involved with SOLAR's organizing work more frequently. Last fall, Aramark campus workers lost free access to the dining halls. Workers came to SOLAR with their reports of racial and linguistic discrimination by their managers. So we're continuously building relations with the North Starbucks workers, mod workers in the Allen Center, and seek to build community, but also utilize our position as undergraduate students to mobilize undergraduate students and to demand the conditions that Northwestern advertises as an employer of choice. And I'm telling you this
is promising things again and again, but like solar has heard otherwise from these promises. So the concerns of the Evanston community are completely justified from our experiences. And this is why solar is backing this coalition and the community and supports the community benefits agreement to ensure that Northwestern promises are followed through and that they respect Evanston. And because solar's experiences and the comments of the community, it demonstrates that this is needed. Labor rights are not just an issue that affect NU's campus, but will affect the Evanston community, especially given the stadium construction. And as students at the school, and there's a lot of undergraduate students here actually supporting just the Evanston community, we acknowledge that we have access to the financial, social, and intellectual resources with help from individuals trying to get involved with civic engagement and the general public. So we aspire to leverage these privileges in order to demand better conditions for our workers and for reinvestment into the Evanston community. The NU administration can do better with the privilege that they also hold. So therefore, solar and undergraduate students hope that NU intentionally and meaningfully listens to this coalition and finds the means to support workers, students, and the community.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna keep it short. My name is Sonia Cohen, I'm part of the 7th Ward. I'm just going to do one of the quotes we brought tonight from Northwestern's chairman of the board, Peter Barrett. He wrote a letter regarding a home he has in Martha's Vineyard. The letter had to do with the expansion of a pool patio a mile from his home. I happened to stumble upon this letter, and I read it and said, I can replace Evanston in our neighborhood with every concern he had in his neighborhood, with the expansion of a pool patio, additional 50 people, and 60 lights, I understand. So I'm just going to read you one of the many quotes. We did bring a few letters to distribute, and this is the quote. Protect us from unbridled development that puts at risk the very thing that brought us here in the first place.
The proper way.
Very simple.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anusha, and I'm a student at Northwestern and a member of Foster Free Northwestern. We are a group of undergraduate and graduate students who stand for intersectional organizing, divestment from institutions that cause harm, investment into community and coalition building, especially within the Evanston community, and democratizing university decision-making. We carry these principles into our perspective on the construction of a new stadium. While we are not against the expansion of Ryan Field, we would like the university to remain aware of and accountable for the different environmental impacts the new stadium will have on the community. Northwestern has stated that the stadium will use the LEED gold certification. It is important to note, however, that many LEED certified buildings have been found to consume more energy than similar non-certified buildings, as developers focus on meeting LEED criteria as cheaply as possible, instead of investing in long-term performance and environmentally friendly choices. It is critical that Northwestern remains entirely transparent in regards to how they are meeting the LEED certification, while focusing not only on sustainability at the time of construction, but also on the long-term energy efficiency of the facility. Northwestern should do everything in its power to mitigate the environmental consequences of construction, which include waste, air and noise pollution, and various forms of contamination. So we ask the university protect the health and safety of the workers, the surrounding community, and the planet throughout and after the construction process. Additionally, advancing a circular economy through the reuse of waste and products in ways that benefit the local environment should be a priority as Northwestern builds and maintains these facilities. We hope that the expansion of the stadium will be an opportunity for the university to meaningfully demonstrate their commitment to sustainability beyond performative action, particularly in light of their new investment guidelines proposed last year with the Northwestern Office of Investment. As such, Fossil Free stands with the Northwestern Accountability Alliance Coalition and in support of a community benefits agreement, and believes that the impact on Evanston should be taken very seriously by Northwestern decision makers. Thank you.
I did not catch her name, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Her name, I'm sorry.
Anusha? Anybody?
Take a brief comment.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, make 3 points. One is that,
Your name, please.
David DiCarlo. One is that if you look at the signs, yes, the pilot and CBA, no commercial rezoning. I just wanted to point out that there's a growing community support around those pillars. And it has been to Northwestern's advantage as the private developer for this project to portray it as a done deal, which is simply not. There's 3 applications that, several of them have not even been submitted to this point. So anybody who thinks it's a done deal, we're just at the beginning of this process. A second point I wanted to make is not only is the commercial rezoning a bad precedent like we've been talking about, it also just seems completely unnecessary. Northwestern already today can host nonprofit events for the community of up to 10,000 people, 35 days a year. How many of those does it actually do at this point? I guess the answer is very few, and perhaps because they're not making money off of it, and that's why they want to strike the word nonprofit from the zoning code. So the community seems to think very critically about that, about opening the door and listening to the actual reality of what Northwestern is doing with opportunities that they already have versus what they're portraying this as with the postcards about, ice festivals and things. They could already do those things. Finally, the Central Street Neighbors Association asked me to point out that they're going to be hosting a forum at the end of April. I believe the date is April 25th, where there'll be a panel about many of these issues, and they'll be putting out some materials that all of us will amplify, make sure that the community has an opportunity to continue to discuss these important topics. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate what we've been hearing and what everyone's been saying, which is that rezoning is radical, it's a huge disruption, it's unprecedented. A community benefits agreement is not. If you look at what's happening in Chicago with Riot Fest and similar festivals, well, Riot Fest actually got kicked out of their ward, bribed some people in a new ward, now they're in there, they're trying to kick them out again. There's other concerts that people aren't happy anymore. So it's not that the 7th Ward is a bunch of NIMBYs or that anyone in Evanston. A lot of wards are here against it is a bunch of NIMBYs. People are starting to realize in 2023 that corporations and large nonprofits have an obligation to the community, and are starting to demand to be treated as an equal partner in the community and to have power in the community. So Northwestern really needs to cut the crap and act serious and bring serious proposals and negotiate in good faith, or we're not going to go anywhere because we're not going to take it.
That's right.
All right.
I didn't catch her name.
I'm sorry, your name again? What is your name?
My name's Emily Levin.
Emily Levin. And would anybody else like to speak before we, no other speakers? Okay.
Yes, my name is Robert Hoffman, and I think, Third Ward, I'd like to say that Northwestern is using the positive things, real or perceived, that it does, that it represents, as a screen for other things that certain people within that institution would like to accomplish in this field of operations that they've determined is their field of operations, so to speak. And the issue for me is that on a large scale, in the last 20 years, we've seen people who do not benefit from decisions pay heavy costs for those decisions at the federal level, as well as state and local levels. And the people in our community are being asked to bear a cost that those who are going to benefit from will not share the cost of. And frankly, that's my greatest issue with this, is that they will benefit and we will pay the cost. And that's unfair.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is William Tong. I'm a reporter for the Daily Northwestern, and I just wanted to clarify something that Assistant Vice President of Communications John Yates had sent us last quarter with regard to the 3 entitlements that the university is asking for. He said there are no current plans to move forward with the stadium redevelopment unless the university can obtain these entitlements. I was hoping something that you could address when you guys are discussing, whether or not that still remains true, and if you could elaborate any further on, what would happen if any of the three are not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right. One more.
Could you just repeat, I didn't hear all.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Can you stand up and say that again? I'm afraid I will.
Yeah, sure. My name is William Tong. I'm a reporter for the Daily Northwestern. And last quarter, we were told by Assistant Vice President of Communications, John Yates, that with regard to the three different permits and or licenses that the university is asking for, there are no current plans to move forward with the stadium redevelopment unless the university can obtain these entitlements. I'm reading that verbatim. And I just wanted to ask, and I hope you will address this during the rest of the discussion tonight, is that still true at this point? And if you could elaborate at all, what happens if the university can't obtain any or all of the three entitlements? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
What are the three
Well,
entitlements?
yeah, we can discuss that.
Okay.
During the Okay, no other comments? Thank you, everybody, for coming out and speaking tonight. Your input is so valuable. It's very beneficial to the committee. I think it's beneficial for Northwestern to get that information from you also. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead then and move forward with our agenda and discussion. Would someone like to move item 4.1?
I move it.
So you move,
I move the discussion of the T1 district that adjoins the Ryan Field Stadium to the west, 4 blocks of Ashland Avenue, and any issues related to planning, land use, building, and zoning pertaining for this area, as well as any proposed demolition of existing structures on and or new construction plans for this area.
thank you. And I'll second that. And I just want to say, as discussed last time, as part of the consent decree, it's the T1 zones and our interpretation. And David, can you hear me?
I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Interpretation, there is no, it does not restrict the T1 zoning. It's T1 zoning. There are a few houses on Colfax Street that are restricted from the historic district, but this covers T1 zoning. We are attorneys from Northwestern, and our attorney are discussing this. But we did want to go ahead. We feel it's beneficial, the information, the discussion, that we should absolutely proceed forward with this as for discussion, for information sharing. And Dave, would you like to add anything? Please jump in.
Well, I think we covered it well. It's, we've had a little back and forth with among the lawyers, and it's both clear in the consent decree and also in the history of this committee, of which I've been a part since its creation, that the T1 district adjoining the stadium as it currently exists plainly is covered by the consent decree, at least with respect to this committee's purview. So I don't think there's any real doubt about that. And I think that another important point is that one of the topics, several of the topics I think that are covered under the consent decree touch very much on the future use of that property, land use being one of those. And so I think, plainly any use of the property in connection with a reconstructed or expanded stadium, or extensive or increased use, broader use of the property, plainly would come within the consent decree. So I think they should be discussed in the committee if this committee is the best opportunity. I think there might be a topic worth discussing whether or not there ought to be a dedicated forum for the neighbors around the stadium to have continuing input as the project moves forward. Because it's going to be a long haul, and they're going to need to have that opportunity. But as we stand now, there's no question it's within the scope of the consent decree, and should be discussed. And so I guess what I would say next is, I think that the university representatives have had an opportunity to hear a number of concerns expressed and some direct questions asked. I think it'd be appropriate at this point to give them the opportunity to respond to any of that.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add on to that, Art Newman, former council member, called this evening, who was involved in he collaborated on the original consent decree, and he really wanted it to be stated that they formed, the consent decree, this committee was formed to create a forum, as Jeff Smith pointed out, where neighbors could talk about potential impact of university proposals for development and projects before any permits are given out. So he wanted to make sure that that I shared what the intent was of the forming of this committee. I don't know if you want to mention anything about prior discussion.
Well, when you look back through the minutes, you see a lot of things that were talked about that are outside of the historic district. There was conversations about 1700 block of Sherman, that building. There's been conversations about. Sure, I'm sorry. There have been conversations about the building in the 1700 block of Sherman. There have been conversations about, in general, the busing system that Northwestern has for students and its routes, and that's outside of the area that the historic district area. There have been conversations about the parking lot by Engelhard Hall. There's been conversations about construction materials at Church and Judson. There have been conversations about South Campus dorms, blue lights at Talmadge Park, and also just general conversations about dorms, the usage of the dorms, plans for renovating the dorms and what that means for housing off campus. There's been conversations about development in general by Northwestern. So there's been a lot of conversations that are outside the historic district that this has been a forum for, and it's been, I think, a very healthy thing for the community and Northwestern to have that kind of dialogue, because as Jeff Smith noted, things had gotten to a very toxic place when the consent decree, at the point the consent decree was agreed to by both city and. I'm so sorry that I'm going back. Things have gotten to, as Jeff Smith said, it had become a very toxic relationship, and I think having this kind of a venue for the airing of concerns and an opportunity to work on those concerns in a mutually beneficial way has been really valuable, and you can see that in a minute.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Would you be amenable to, I know Ms. Rosinski brought up a particular question regarding the zone about the fence. Can you just respond to that question regarding that particular T1 zone? I think there was concerns about whether or not the fence would be removed.
Yeah, I don't think we should answer. All right, so the T1 zone district in North Evanston is bounded by Isabella on the north, Ashland on the east, Central on the south, and the community neighborhood on the west. So currently that district serves as parking for a number of different purposes. We lease out parking there for the North Shore Hospital, and they have their operations staff at the hospital park there during the day. We actually allow Evanston they have some parking spots reserved for them, and the city of Evanston provides commuters with permits and earns revenue off the parking. And then during emergencies like summer storms, other types of severe weather events, we allow Commonwealth Edison or the utilities to stage their emergency operations there so that they can respond quickly to any issues that occur in the neighborhood with regard to interruption of power and other types of things. So, then, on evenings and weekdays, or evenings and weekends, it serves as the parking lot to support, whatever, events are allowed to take place in the adjoining U2 district, which has a number of different athletic facilities in it. As we go forward, there is no intention to change any use of that T1 district. It will remain the same. And currently, we have no plans other than normal summer maintenance for that particular part of that T1 district.
Go ahead.
I'm only here to talk about the T1 district. I can't talk about Canal Shores.
I mean, yeah.
Well, when I was reading through I think it was the text amendment you originally submitted in January, I thought I read something about that, there may not be hospital, parking available for employees. So maybe it was in the U2, not the T1. And, as this stadium project would go through, as you guys currently envision it.
So we currently have a parking lease with North Shore Hospital, and I'm not really entitled to give you the particulars of that lease, but we meet our obligations to them, both in the U2 district and the T1 district. The bulk of the parking spots that they use are in the T1 district, and that's the only one that I'll refer to.
And that would continue. They would be able to continue using.
We
that?
have a lease with them until August of 2028.
August of
2028.
28.
2028.
Okay. So that would not be impacted.
We have not had any discussions with them about anything beyond that particular lease. We are not obligated to have the discussions with them yet. So when the terms of the lease come up for renewal discussions, we will have that with the hospital. But I'm not at liberty to discuss that particular agreement because it's confidential.
I think my question was, are you aware of where I'm talking about, where there's pillars and then a fence? Like, it's not a regular fence at the end of the street?
It's a decorative, the whole fence, as I recall, it's sort of a decorative fence.
Well, it's not really, because
It's wrought iron, there's
it's
pillars.
only, but it's only.
How much did you do on the whole side?
What I'm looking for here is take commitment on that you do not plan, with no intention of letting parking lot go through the residential neighborhood. So where those pillars are, if you did it every 20 feet or every 40 feet or every 50 feet, they're only at the ends of the street. And you're in the master plan area, so I just wonder the long-term plans that you are not sharing with us. And I think I'd rather just say, yeah, I had done it to sit there for the 5W so far, but you didn't. Not you personally, but it was not designed that way. So I don't think you've answered the question.
So Mary, can you restate your question? So you want to make,
There's three sets of pillars.
okay,
That have a gate between them that are the equidistance of the street at which they're in front of. So that the piece of fencing can just be removed and cars can come out of the parking lot, through the street, past the park fences, and over to Green Bay. And if you were having a real fence, like most people, they wouldn't strategically only put 3 pillars. They're not equidistant along the whole length of the fence. It's a very long fence, but they're only at the end of those 3 streets. So as if to allow the parking when they get overflow, if they're doing big events and they can't get on the Central Street, that the second lane going is not on Isabella and not on the Central Street, it's down John Livingston or Chapel. And I think that's just a very poor plan. But if y'all go down to the alley, I think you'll see what I'm talking about.
And then this was not presented to us when the parking lot was discussed with the community. This the pillar kind of thing was totally not presented. Another thing that's interesting is there's no vegetation on the other side of these pillars. Of this little area, the area that goes from one end of the street to the other, the fence has hinges.
on one of the areas, one of the hinges on one side is totally broken off, so it's already only like standing on one hinge. It's very easy to take off,
Right.
and there's no trees planted there, which they had promised there was good vegetation at least 3 feet tall. There's nothing like that in these 3 areas. There's nothing planted. So it seems to me that it was done with a very intention, you know, and, no plans, but.
Okay, well, thanks for that feedback. I'm not aware of that particular, installation or, those particular areas of fence that you're talking about, but we'll certainly can take a look at that and, appreciate the feedback. And so we'll take that under advisement and, as we look forward to plans for the area, but basically that T1 district, is expected to remain in the same use. And I think that's good feedback that we'll take into account as we, develop further plans. So thank you very much.
Let's see, what else we have. So overall impact, with regard to the parking, you don't see any impact as a result of the stadium? I mean, certainly there'll be impact.
It's going to continue to be used as its current use.
But it'll be increased, right? We'll have increased use.
Well, that all depends on what uses are allowed in the U2 district. But it will remain as parking. You can't, I mean, it's only, I think it's slightly under, just a little bit over 900 spaces there on the west lot. And so that's what we have to work with, and that's what we'll be using.
Question.
I had a question about tailgating. Is that specifically allowed in facilities? And then if there were to be events in the district, how would tailgating be determined to be allowed or not allowed or regulated? I genuinely don't know. So I'm curious how that works between game days and then potentially other events.
I can't personally tell you the interpretation of the zoning law with regard to tailgating.
So if there's a concert, would there be tailgating allowed at a concert? Is it going to be expected to be parking only? If it's, you know, an ice rink, is parking going to be there? Is there going to be tailgating for ice rinks? I mean, kids get rowdy too. You know, I'm just trying to get planned use of the parking facility if the uses change.
There's not going to be any changes to the parking that we have on that district.
But are there any policies? Does Northwestern have a policy regarding, will they have a policy regarding the tailgating?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think that's an offset question. When there is a football game and there's tailgating, and if that were to be considered a prior use to be expanded to the concert venue, the street next to my townhouse complex is closed during those events, all the local traffic and the police monitor it all around. And so would our streets be closed to other events like they are to football games? You know, guests can't come, nobody can come except a resident when there's a football game.
So street.
That's the city. It's the city decide. Yeah.
So then I think the answer would be yes. We'd have no street closures, I assume, if this were to happen, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm also just thinking about this idea that the T1 would be stay as a parking lot. I think that the change in use in the U2 zone is going to affect the way the parking lot is used. I think, you know, you're going to have, you're going to be having probably a lot more tailgating, a lot more nights with that kind of activity going on in the parking lot. So even though it's about parking cars, that doesn't change. I think what's going on in the lot will change.
Correct.
A lot.
Yeah.
That's a concern. I think that's a concern that's worth discussing.
Right, I mean, the increased use, what will the impact be with the increase? It'll be a lot increased parking.
And it's what is closest to the resident property. So I think that's the biggest concern. Normally, if it's just parking cars, you have a bit of a buffer, but when you're incorporating tailgating into that, mean, I live at the, closer to Central, but I happen to know tailgaters at the north end of the parking lot, and we can hear their tailgate set up from our house. So,
And that's during the day.
and that's daytime hours.
So now we have a situation where we're gonna have people that leaving the concert and potentially continuing their party after the concert in the parking area, because tailgating would be allowed.
So it wouldn't be allowed to by zoning, because, yeah, 10 o'clock, everyone would have to clear out ways.
I want to remind everyone that the housing in these areas is not new. We have single pane glass windows that do not insulate against sound. So, with the exception of several homes along the alleys of that abut the stadium lot, most homes are nearly or over 100 years old and have at least 50-year-old windows. So the sound that enters homes, even with windows closed, is extreme. I live I live on the alley along Eastwood, and at night games, my son's room actually looks out over the stadium. He wakes up every time. And it's not the actual game, it's everybody in the lot. So it's the music playing, it's the people exiting, it's the traffic. And we have had to go out and actually talk to people because the police will not respond. So even after 11 o'clock, my husband has had to go out and have face-to-face confrontation with people who are tailgating after night games to ask them to turn off the music. And I've actually feared for his safety.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I would say something else. We have a brand new park, McCullough Park, and my bedroom faces the park, and it's very well illuminated with a beautiful basketball court. And people are already coming now. They used to, with the old park, come in the summer once in a while. They would call the police at midnight several times before maybe the police car would come. But now the park is in use almost every weekend. People come, teenagers come after 11 o'clock. Theoretically, practically, according to zoning, the basketball court is closed at 9. So if we had concerts, that park would be a perfect place to party. And it would be, I think I have a right to sleep. And I do have storm windows. They are 50 years, no, they're more than 50 years old. They are 80 years old, but they have storm windows. And when there is a football game, and I know football game is a reality of life, I can hear the announcer and everybody through the storm windows and everything. But that's one thing. That's 6 times a year, and it's mostly during the day. But concerts, I can even hear concerts coming from when there's a concert in Wilmette or with the wind, just like the guy from your board, from Northwestern Board, was complaining about the sound traveling over water. Well, the sound always travels. Ask the people in Wilmette who have been dealing with the chiller's noise for years, and you have not corrected even that, and that's just a minor thing.
Thank you. In the back corner.
I'm
Yeah.
Andrea Versenyi, I'm also in the 7th Ward. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what is your name?
Andrea Versenyi. I don't know if this has already been discussed. We've been talking about the events themselves, but for example, when there's a football game, in addition to tailgating starting at 7 a.m. for an 11 a.m. game or going to 11 p.m. for an evening game, starting the day before, often at 6 a.m. and continuing the next day, usually a Sunday at 6 a.m., we hear a lot of banging from the stadium as they clean. I don't know what they're doing. But if there's a new stadium and there are concerts, I don't know who posted, there was a video going around of how a football stadium or a soccer stadium somewhere was transformed for a rock concert for approximately 35,000 people. And it took literally 6 days a night for them to transform
field, the stadium, to protect all of that, to set it up, to have the lights come for the concert, the sound system checked, the trucks coming in, and that's going to be, I don't know how many days of setup and how many days of takedown. So it could be that there's a concert on a Friday night, but setup starts at Tuesday, 6 a.m. and continues takedown till Thursday after that. So I think one has to look at what is involved in actually having a concert, because they're going to want to protect the investment. They're going to want to protect the field. They're going to want to protect the walls. They're going to want to protect everything that they've just spent money on when setting it up for that. And that needs to be factored into how much time, the hours of noise, because 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning is kind of not the end of the world, but it's annoying and you don't want it happening every day.
Right, thank you. And then,
Yeah. I'm Jim Cigarelli from the 7th Ward, and I was hoping somebody could address the question that the Daily
oh, yeah,
Northwestern
thank you.
raised, if possible.
Thank you. So if you want to discuss the three entitlements, right, that I mentioned for John Yates.
Sure. Luke Thor, Vice President for the operations for the university. Really appreciate all the comments tonight. No, there's great interest in the project. I think to date, since we've announced the project, the university has held over 20 public forums for these discussions, and I think 25 sets of office hours. Plan to continue that going forward, and I think as early as next week. And so look forward to future opportunities to discuss the stadium. As alluded to here, the purpose of this committee is to talk about the T1, T2, U1 districts. And really the scope of this meeting tonight is in the stadium conversation. So as alluded to, there's a meeting next week on Wednesday between the city and the university to discuss how do we make sure this committee could move forward in the spirit and the honor of the consent decree. And so happy to talk about any other questions with the T1 district tonight.
I've been looking and maybe I've missed something. I hope I've missed something, but they're all during the day. So if you work normal hours, you can't come. Yeah.
But can you discuss the entitlements?
Okay, we're happy to talk about the T1, T2, and U1 districts tonight.
Why not?
Where you pay the cost and you get, and you have the benefit.
I'm not gonna answer the questions like we have a forum.
No, why do we have? If we wouldn't have come here if you had said, these are the things that we can't talk about. People would not, if you had said up front, and you didn't do that, so you in a sense covered your being here in that way, and then we get here, and then you go, oh, we can't talk about that. That's not open discussion. We can't tell you. That's not helpful.
And this committee
And it's not creating good, it's not, if you want to create better relationship with people, and I'm not taking out push on you. You're being paid to do that job, and I understand that. But maybe you need to talk to the people that pay you and tell them if you really want to work with these people, you need to be honest and transparent, and you need to have somebody here who can talk to us about what we're asking about. You can do us that courtesy.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, and I forget your name. I do, Robert, and I appreciate that comment. You know, I think, as Luke stated originally, we've had over 20 community forums. Right, so we've had over 20 community.
Let him speak his piece.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And at our last forum, we talked about our concerns with talking about any items outside of those specifically listed in the consent decree. And so the council member and the city's attorney and the university attorney, they've discussed this by email, and we're going to have a formal meeting next week to determine what's within the scope of this meeting and what we should discuss. Now, what I would say to you, and first of all, I mean, I think all of the comments today were great, and I've taken notes and I've learned a lot. And this is coming from someone that spent a lot of my professional career in civic engagement and advocacy, and so I really, truly appreciate this. And what I would say is that, you know, I've heard there are a number of people here from different wards. We've went to 6 out of the 9 wards, and we've spoken directly with your council members and council individuals. And I would encourage you to continue working through your council members. This is a great forum for conversations around what's included in the consent decree. We're not saying that we won't answer these questions. There is a forum, there's opportunities for us to engage in this way and answer those questions specifically. If we want to have that conversation, that discussion, you can certainly ask your council member to invite us to one of your community forums. This gentleman right here with the daily will certainly be able to get his question answered tomorrow. He can reach back out and follow up with John Yates. We're not saying that we won't answer his question. We're saying that this is just this is not the appropriate.
Can we have one of the forums at night, so just like people can talk, not during the
I can't hear you, sir.
Thank you. Aaron Cohen again, and Mr. Davis, you have my email address, I know. Beginning in September, I have asked, oh gosh, I don't know that I can count so high, questions directed to you, to President Schill, to the trustees, to Mr. Yates. I have had many, many questions. How many of those questions have been answered? None. Absolutely none. A big round zero. And because I understand, having worked for Northwestern, for Kellogg in public relations myself, I kind of get how it works. And with all due respect, really, because you're doing an admirable job according to the standards of your job description, I believe, which has been to absolutely obfuscate, to barrage this community with pablum, to lack even one iota of transparency. And, you know, I imagine Northwestern will give you a bonus for it. Meanwhile, you're being paid, and I missed what might have been a delightful neighborhood party this evening so that I could come and yet waste more breath to ask questions. And I do have one question, though, which is outside the purview, unfortunately, of this meeting, and that is, I was by the old Burger King, and I'm curious, in that new building, what is the percentage of minority and women-owned businesses that have been contracted? And is that building, let alone the other buildings that have been constructed over the last 25 years, created intergenerational wealth? But I don't actually expect an answer to those. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Steve Wigan, and I'm a member of the Northwestern University Graduate Workers Union. And I'm not sure if you know, Northwestern is capable of addressing this question or not, but I'm just gonna try because Dave, you specifically made a comment at the last one of these meetings where you said you were open, or Northwestern was open to a community benefits agreement, and I was just wondering if you might be able to tell us some of the basic conditions that would have to be met for Northwestern to move forward with negotiating a community benefits agreement.
Like I said, that is outside the purview of
I'd like you to say, that's embarrassing that you have that. Wait, just a moment. Inviting us in, and you are not answering the question. It's really embarrassing. So you are not coming in a very,
And you come to board meetings to sell your product.
We're not buying.
As a military veteran, I've seen 20+ years of kind of things, and it's cost us a lot, and it still costs us. And I expect better from the university, which I have some respect for. And I'm not blaming any of you personally. I don't know you personally. But please, do us the service of being honest about what we can talk about and what we can't. If we can't talk about what we've been told. No, I'm not. This is not a personal thing.
That we feel all of this, we've been discussing these topics for 20 years.
You know, really.
We feel like we should be.
Robert.
I have another question for you. So I figured they won't answer. question. Well, maybe, what is the procedure for, you know, I know that the zoning has allowed whatever, right? But the zoning application, I believe, so far that's been submitted is specific around the U2. So has anything been submitted to change zoning for T1 at this point?
No.
Okay, so then, as we continue down this process, what is the working relationship between the community and yourself and Eleanor to provide reassurances or, you know, like various, you know, concern about opening up the fence into the neighborhood, or tailgating, ice skating or concert or whatever event is happening? You know, how do we, what is the process for those conversations and to protect the community?
Right. So I think history, and Julie, you can speak to it better, that this really has been a venue for neighborhoods and neighbors to come together to discuss concerns around Northwestern, where Northwestern abuts, or, you know, joins neighborhoods. So it really has traditionally been this committee, and so currently this is what we have. And so we feel, and as Jeff Smith and as Dave, please chime in, please just jump in anytime. You know, what we see is that it does say it does not exclude this T1 zone. It doesn't exclude, this is incorporated into the consent decree, but we also feel, as Jeff Smith pointed out, unless there's another official committee formed, that right now, this is the venue we have. So we do feel that all these topics should be discussed.
Well, I know that as part of the community benefits agreement, that has been one of the factors that the community is looking for, is a more formalized venue to be able to voice concerns without getting stonewalled from Northwestern saying they can't answer because this isn't the appropriate venue. So I just want to make sure that, you know, between you and Eleanor, that we have these conversations to make sure that we have a voice moving forward.
Absolutely.
Like I said, we bought in this neighborhood expecting 6 football games and to raise a family and to be a part of this vibrant community, but we need to be able to protect our property and our children.
Well, I think, you know, as a member of this committee, I guess I was really surprised to hear that this, you know, that this T1 district is not part of the conversation. I mean, that's the truth. It didn't occur to us that this would be off the table because of the zoning by the stadium. So it's kind of, it's new, you know, to hear that it's not, that Northwestern feels very differently. Because it seems pretty clear to me that the language in the consent decree, and Dave Schoenfeld, I hope he's still there, but, you know, is a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but he's read through it very carefully and was here from the very beginning. And, you know, it seems as though, it seems very clear that this should be part of the conversation.
Julie, I am here, and, you know, with all due respect to the Northwestern guys, I know a coach witness when I hear one, and you've obviously been given, you know, your limitations, and I understand that, I respect that, but I have to tell you, I think that it's wrong, and let me tell you why. As I mentioned earlier, the consent decree plainly addresses and brings within the purview of this committee issues relating to, among other things, land use of that T1 district that we're talking about. And there's really no argument that I can even conceive of that a substantial change in the operations of, you know, at the stadium for which that land provides parking won't affect the land use of that property, and with it, the neighborhoods adjoining it. And let's bear in mind, remember, the whole purpose of a T1 district, that is to say, the way that property is zoned, is to provide a transitional buffer between a more intensive use of, you know, it's a U2 district of sporting venues, and the adjoining neighborhood. So the very function of that district is to buffer the adjoining neighborhood from the activities being undertaken on the U2 district. or on the YouTube property. And if those activities intensify, as is proposed by Northwestern, then inevitably it's going to have an impact on the T1, the use of the T1 district, and with it, the neighborhood adjoining it. So I don't think it's a sustainable position. I know you guys have your directions, and I may not change anything tonight, but I don't think it's a sustainable position to say, well, we can't talk about anything we're going to do on the YouTube property because that's not a T1 district. These are inextricably intertwined, and the impacts are going to reach the community. And that's the function of the T1 district, is to buffer that. And the function of this committee is to talk about changes in the use of that will eliminate or reduce that buffering effect. So it's really not a sustainable argument. It's really not one that's consistent with the way that this committee has operated for 19 years, to try to get a conversation going so that the community can express its concerns and raise its questions, and Northwestern can convey its plans, its thinking, and its needs. And then collaboratively, we can discuss ways to accommodate all of that. But we can't do that if the conversation is just shut down on an arbitrary and artificial line. So I know there's nothing you guys can do tonight, I'm sure, but I would encourage you to consider not just the legality, although I don't think there's really any question that the position you're taking is sustainable legally. But that's not even the important point, right? The important point is we've got to have this conversation. You've got community members who are uncertain about your plans. They're very concerned about what you're intending to do. You've got, a need, I think, to work this out with the community so that, you don't have a firestorm over this. And right now, as Councilmember Kelly notes, this is the forum that is available to have those conversations. And so I encourage you to, sort of reconsider the legalistic approach that you're taking to, limiting the discussion here arbitrarily, because I don't think it's productive for the community as a whole. And I frankly don't think it's good for Northwestern. I've been on this committee a long time, and I remember the I'll call it the pre-President Shapiro days, when, those kinds of arbitrary legal restrictions on what your predecessors would or wouldn't talk about just led to a lot more divisiveness and a lot more lack of confidence in the good faith of the university. And I don't think that was necessary. I think it was a self-inflicted wound. And I would encourage you not to make the same mistake again with this project.
Thank you, David. So would you like to comment?
Well, what I was going to say was, David, there were 3 lawyers that reviewed the consent decree. 2 of them have a similar opinion and disagree with the one that you just voiced, and suggested that the 2 parties meet privately to discuss a way through this particular disagreement, and that this meeting be postponed so we could have that discussion. That discussion is scheduled for Wednesday of next week. Alderperson Kelly and perhaps the other committee members decided to go ahead with this particular meeting, in spite of the fact that the 2 parties don't actually agree with what the consent decree says. We attended this meeting in order to really to take the high road. You scheduled the meeting. We felt that it was important that Northwestern be here, but we're only going to comment on the things that we believe are consistent with the consent decree and the opinion of the 2 other lawyers who reviewed the agreement. So hopefully we'll have that meeting. We'll be able to discuss a good way forward and, use this as a positive venue. But, you know, we're here trying to, live up to our side of the spirit of that consent decree as we understand it.
But you have gained some valuable information that you'll look into, the fence issue. I think some of the concerns about noise, obviously still into I mean, there is a lot of expression of concern that will absolutely impact the T1 zone. That's undoubtable. And I don't know that it can be remedied with the current proposal, but you've heard it, these are concerns that do impact this area. So noise, tailgating parties, and much more, right? Traffic, right? Traffic, parking, I mean, all this will impact. And so with regard to entitlements, and maybe at another time, depending how we move forward, I hope we can have in the future, not such restricted responses. I think this has been over the last 20 years, a really wonderful venue for working out concerns with neighbors. And I hope that Northwestern will reconsider its position. And this is probably one of your largest meetings that you've had with neighbors turning out. I mean, where we have you present and to discuss this. And I think this is really valuable. We have so many people with so many comments tonight. So I hope you appreciate it anyway, the input.
I'd like to address this to the Northwestern representatives. When I understand there's a lot going on here that's unseen, I understand that sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I understand that there's legal issues, but to tell this group that came here in good faith that, well, we've had 20 to 25 meetings, I think I heard 2 of the representatives say that, it doesn't matter if you have 150 meetings. If you're not bringing us answers and it's felt that you're not working with us as partners, it comes across as condescension. I'd also like to thank the Northwestern student journalists for carrying on the great journalistic tradition of comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. Thank you. My name's Maureen O'Donnell, by the way.
Thank you.
I live in the 7th floor.
Great, thank you, Maureen.
It's nice to also add one other thing. I think what you taught tonight was an incredible frustration of being told, to your point, that there's been all these meetings. These meetings haven't ever been a full comprehensive plan. This meeting started out with there was a trailer to a movie, and this is what's going to happen. And somewhere along the line, going to the city board meeting became a promo, but there was no real detail. And then all of a sudden, Northwestern was defining what was transformational for Evanston and not taking any input or soliciting any of what's in all of Evanston, not just Evanston 6 in first ward, but all of Evanston. So I think what you're sensing is a growing sense of frustration throughout the community that Northwestern is hopefully will be a community partner, not a dictator and a definer of our vision. So I think that's what a lot of this is about too. Because I think we just found out what the plans really were. The whole working committee, that stuff about nonsense. They did not know you were thinking about content and commercial. So when I personally resented when people talk about, well, we met with the community, you did not. You guys did probably talk to them about things, but you didn't talk about them about the reality of what you were trying to do. And that was successful.
Thank you for that comment, because I've been wondering what the forums and the working group experience had been like for people.
They boiled a lot into the roundtable, which I think, I'll be sure I'll get you a copy of it. But we were all shocked at our reps didn't tell us. We're like, how could you not mention it? And they said, we didn't do that yet.
About the working group.
About the working group didn't get any information about all this commercial stuff that they wanted.
Oh. I asked the working group representative of my neighbor 6 months ago, before all the big announcements, you know, they talking about concerts, that came up 3 years ago. Oh, no, that's not supposed to be on the table. That was the response I got from my working group member. We're just talking about the height, the noise, the lighting concerns. They're listening to our feedback. And I think, you know, in terms of PR, the fact that they've announced that they have a general contractor on board is just further, for lack of a better word, slap in the face that they don't respect our feedback or our input, and they're not truly soliciting it from us. Because clearly, in order to have a general contractor on board, you have a design concept. You've got an architect on board, engineering staff, and if you've got Walsh Turner as a team for your GC, you are moving forward with construction. So quite frankly, to answer the Daily Northwestern question about whether or not they're gonna do this, there's many dollars spent, not just on marketing and PR campaigns, but true dollars spent by Northwestern right now in this process of construction. And really, for you, what I hope you can convey to Mayor Biff and your other council members is the position that the city sits in, because we are in a position now to negotiate this community benefits agreement like no other. Because the reality is, the wheels are moving, and it's not gonna stop. It's not going to, without big egg in the face of Ryan and all of NU's donors, right?
Well, I
So
do-
we need to keep the conversation going, and this is a good start, but this isn't stopping, the train is going.
Right, well, that's what I think, I mean, currently this is an official venue called the NU City Committee, and I think it is an opportune, you know, venue and for these discussions. Now, if something else gets formed, another official committee, you know, with the city and NU. But for the moment, this is what we have, and I think it really is. And I do wish we could have had more open conversation this evening. I do think almost everything that was brought up actually impacts that T1 zone. We discussed some T1, but some T1 questions were sort of off the table, and some felt like some T1 items were on. But I do think this committee was created to work things out in an amicable and cooperative way with Northwestern. I mean, we all value Northwestern, and I think we want to work together, and that is the intent of this committee. So I hope we can continue going forward to work cooperatively and amicably to work out issues together with the neighbors. That's, I think, what we're about. So, any other comments? Okay, well, with that, shall we adjourn? Adjourn on, okay.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you all.
I'll even make you one. My family gave up on me.